Hello everybody. Welcome to, well, probably just a chill stream. Today we're just gonna chill. I'm not going to be playing a game today. Sorry, my mouth doesn't look like it's weird mouth tracking. Don't blame me. Let me check my settings real quick. Is there anything I can do to fix this? Let's see. It sucks I can't do advanced face tracking. Also, apparently the settings on this are so broken it literally will only follow my mouth. And not when I'm talking, which sucks. Alright. Let's see if I can get something for us to watch. Is YouTube on? YouTube's on. Good. Good. That's very good. Gotta keep that chat open for me, so let's look around for something. Also, anything I put on my screen, I will show the name of the person so that you can find them. I take no credit for any of the stuff that I show unless it's my own channel. Also, don't mind me, I'm eating as well. You know what? Because it was sent to me, we might as well react to that. Also, if you can hear the sound I set up, that's going to be in the background the entire time. Also, to find the sound that I'm playing, just look up Cozy Rain. Rain on open window, no ads, thunder, and rain sounds for sleeping. I'm using as background because I like the sound of rain. It's relaxing, helps me think, as well as movement does. Oh my god, I'm so fancy. We will be at this for 1 or 2 hours, depending on my mood. Now then, do we have anything to react to? Let me check my thing real quick. Nope, looks like I don't have anything there. Alright, so that means we're gonna react to stuff that someone sent to me. Now, just as a heads up, if you want to find out where to find this, the name is Super Earth Galactic War Data Archive. Hello. Anything at all? I don't even know why I had that there. Oh boy, ads are fun, aren't they? Cool. I love ads, man.
The battle for Cyberstan. Over 17 days, the Helldivers and Super Earth Armed Forces carved a path to the cyborg capital. Operation Valid Pretext would become the largest campaign of the Second Galactic War, and by far, its most deadly.
Squad lost. Deploying replacement squad.
On the morning of February 3rd, 2186, Super Earth High Command initiated Operation Valid Pretext. Intelligence had confirmed the unthinkable. The blueprints for the Star of Peace had been stolen. The automatons now held the power to unmake entire worlds. In order to secure the safety of the free galaxy, Cyberstan had to be liberated. But Cyberstan's story did not begin with the automatons. Following the cyborg surrender at the end of the First Galactic War, the mines of Cyberstan became a site of rehabilitation for the terrorist regime, under the guidance of managed democracy. But it did not remain so. Newly secured intelligence revealed that a spacecraft, designated Vessel Zero, had departed from Cyberstan 4 years before the automatons first emerged in force. Cyberstan would fall when the machines returned during the reclamation. In the months that followed, vast terraforming projects reshaped its surface. Industrial expansion on a massive scale was detected beneath skies, choked by poisonous emissions. Cyberstan was not merely occupied in hatred of freedom. It was their origin. Phase 1 of Operation Valid Pretext was the march to Cyberstan. 200 million Helldivers were allocated to the operation. If all reinforcements were depleted, the offensive would end in failure. Helldivers were tasked with liberating a path to Cyberstan, with Aurora Bay or Merak serving as the staging ground for the coming battle. But the automatons had already begun layering their defenses. The march would need to breach their fortified gates before a staging ground could be secured. The march began on Lasath. The automatons deployed heavily armored units to halt the advance, deploying reinforcements in greater numbers than ever before. But success was the only acceptable outcome. To support the operation, High Command authorized a new generation of siege weaponry, including the fleet-wide distribution of the Bastion Mark 16. The Bastion shattered fortified positions. Helldiver squads pushed block by block through the streets of Buku's Rest. The key strategic position was quickly secured under the cover of heavy ordnance, causing automaton positions across the planet to crumble. The first defenses mobilized to stall the march were trampled underfoot in less than a day. Lasath was secured. Maintaining momentum, the march pressed forward to Court Bay. The automatons mobilized a surge of devastators to hold the line, but terror would not obstruct the path of liberty. Wherever the socialist toasters formed their walls, Helldivers broke them. One by one, the devastators were crushed beneath the unstoppable force as Helldivers pressed forward without hesitation. The bots' emergency protocols were triggered, bolstering their defenses of Aurora Bay and Merak, as well as calling the Jet Brigade to reinforce Court Bay. The Rapid Assault Unit descended in calculated waves to overwhelm advancing positions. But the jet-propelled nuisance simply deflected off the unstoppable momentum of the march. What was once an unbreakable wall to breach the Valdez sector crumbled in a single day beneath the heels of Super Earth's finest. Between the two possible staging grounds, the Helldivers chose Aurora Bay. Aurora Bay housed the Jet Brigade factories as well as 2 cities. Its liberation would yield long-term damage to the automaton war machine. Resistance was heavier than any world yet encountered. The Jet Brigade struck with unrelenting pressure, backed by the oppressive incendiary barrage of the Incineration Corps. Eaglemount became the focal point of the assault. Despite the resistance, Helldivers pushed through the settlement and established an initial...
I slightly remember this, though I only really joined the fight when when they got to Cyberstan. I don't often join these kinds of fights because It's humanity, not my job. But yeah, they did good. They did very well.
Initial foothold on Aurora Bay. For a moment, the success of Phase 1 appeared inevitable. But a series of automaton counterattacks began, putting the entire operation at risk.
Yeah. I heard that this happened.
The situation was more fragile than it appeared. Over the course of the march, Helldivers had been presented with a choice. Use the Democracy space station to raise liberated planets along the path, sacrificing 24 hours of operational support, or preserve it to sustain the offensive. To sustain the momentum of the march, Helldivers chose to maintain support from the DSS. Thus, the path to Cyberstan would depend on the Helldivers to defend it. And just as the push on Aurora Bay intensified, the Hulk surge on Menkent deployed to Lesoth. Hulks were deployed in numbers never seen before. Urgent support was required to stop the barbaric assault. But Aurora Bay stood on a razor's edge. After securing Eagle Mount, liberation efforts reached a brutal stalemate, and additional reinforcements were required to break through. There were fewer than 4 days remaining to secure.
Oh, so in this situation, it means they would have to pick to defend the line, to either keep pushing, but lose the line behind them, which means they'd lose access to support, to back up to ships and all of that, or they'd have to give up the push for a bit to clear the forces behind them. Oh, that does make sense. It's an unfortunate situation. It's not an easy choice because either one sucks.
Secure a staging ground. Any diversion from Aurora Bay risked the failure of the Major Order. But allowing the Hulk surge to advance unchecked risked something worse. If less
That all of the Helldivers would be pinned at Aurora Bay without reinforcements, which means the enemy force would come in waves and destroy everything. Yeah, that's not really a situation we'd want. Who the hell messaged me? Sorry, just gonna open my Discord on my phone so it's easier to keep track of what the hell is going on. Alright.
South and Court Bay fell, the path to Cyberstan would collapse.
The final horn has sounded. The cup has been lifted, and the lights have gone out.
Don't care.
Throughout the next day, the situation only worsened. Aurora Bay was not reinforced. Helldivers who were committed to the assault remained, but without a unified push, control of Eagle Mount continued to slip. At the same time, Lesoth strained beneath the weight of the Hulk surge. The defense desperately required additional support. The march was suspended between two crises, both drifting towards failure. Democracy demanded a sacrifice. A decision had to be made. Aurora Bay was abandoned. The threat of the Hulk surge could not be ignored. As reinforcements arrived, the situation was critical. Hulks advanced in synchronized waves, trapping and encircling Helldiver squads across multiple sectors. But Democracy's path would not be broken. Helldivers adapted quickly, isolating the armored formations and dismantling them with disciplined precision. Yet the scale of the assault demanded increased firepower. Anti-tank explosives were concentrated to destroy large masses of the mechanical abominations. Hulk formations that had once advanced unchecked were met with overwhelming destructive force. As their numbers declined, the Surge desperately pressed forward, but Helldivers pressed harder. Across the battlefield, heaps of burning hulks began to litter the ground. As the Hulk Surge began to crumble, the automatons made a final attempt to fracture the offensive. An assault was launched against Court Bay, a desperate attempt to collapse the path to Cyberstan before Lesath was secured. Helldivers dismantled the remainder of the Hulks before deployments began on Court Bay. Without the weight of the Hulk Surge behind it, the automaton assault quickly faltered. Reinforcements stabilized the defense within hours. Then, the Democracy Space Station intervened. The Eagle Storm shattered the remaining automaton forces. The path to Cyber...
I will say this once, and only once. The Eagle Storm is not helpful. It killed my ally like 18 times. Like, hell no, my friend. I am not interested in death. But things happen, honestly. I'm not too surprised. Okay.
Cyberstan was finally secured. It was now time for the march to resume.
Yep.
Aurora Bay remained heavily entrenched. Its cities would demand days of fighting that the offensive no longer had. With the Jet Brigade fleeing to Cyberstan on the previous day, the march redirected to the shorter path on Merak. The dense jungles and winding rivers of Merak presented a battlefield reminiscent of Malevolent Creek. As progress began to mount on Merak, success once again seemed inevitable. The automaton counteroffensive had failed, but the socialist toasters were not finished. Something strange began to appear in communication channels. The automatons had breached the galactic communication systems. Dispatch channels were filled with disturbing messages. Casualty figures appeared without verification, claiming hundreds of millions of Helldivers had already died on Merak. Strategic updates were replaced with absurd directives, including a fabricated order to destroy the one true flag. The bots could...
I will... This war was not my problem. I joined because, well, I'm not exactly evil. I'm not gonna let people die. However, I'm not on either side of the battlefield. I'm not really... How am I supposed to say this? Well, no matter what, I'm gonna sound like a traitor to democracy in one way or another, because there's nothing I can say that's gonna make it sound better. I'm on neither side. I'm not on democracy. I am not on the machines, the squids, or the other ones. I just joined the fray to help a friend. To fight alongside a friend. I don't care for this war. I did help fight in Cyberstan for a bit. Didn't go very well, I can definitely say that.
no longer halt the advance on the battlefield. This was a desperate attempt to fracture morale. But the galaxy's most obedient fighting force remained free of thought. Helldivers were never ordered to read. Carrying on unfazed, the automatons continued to lose control of Merak. Yet the bots continued to try to find sympathizers by complaining about their software defect backlog. Even the Jet Brigade, redeployed from Aurora Bay in a final attempt to slow the liberation, could not halt the momentum. Merak was liberated. The staging ground had been secured. The march to Cyberstan was complete. Galactic communication systems were restored, and the remaining reserves were verified and corrected. Preparations then began for the next phase of the operation, landfall.
Yep. C-Day, Cyberstan.
Following the liberation of Merak, preparations began immediately for the next phase of the operation. The march had secured a path to Cyberstan, but the cost had been substantial. Helldiver casualties had already reached the higher range of acceptable estimates. But a disturbing transmission was received, revealing the true masterminds behind the Automaton Legion. The Cyborgs. The disgusting half-machine, half-traitors of humanity have been the puppeteers all along, pulling the strings of terror. Taking advantage of Super Earth's boundless benevolence, the cyborgs twisted the machines that were provided to aid them in the mines of Cyberstan. These first automatons were sent away in a stolen vessel, Vessel Zero. Their slaves would carry out their terrorist plot, culminating in the theft of the Star of Peace blueprints, an act of terror, years in the making.
Oh my god. Actually, going back to that, technically it's their fault that all of this happened. No offense to Super Earth, but it is technically their fault that everything happened in the first place. If this is considered treason, please don't. I'm not against you, I'm just saying out loud, making a weapon like this is only going to make your war longer. Because if they get their hands on it, it's your hands that are bloody for what happened. I'm not against you. I'll still fight. Because I have allies who are on the front who I'd rather keep alive anyway. But I'm not going to defend you. That's not my problem. I'm not there for Super Earth. I'm there for those who matter to me. Anyway, back to what I was doing. Back to this anyway.
The Helldivers were not just dropping to face the Toasters. They were up against their half-bred slave masters as well. Across Cyberstan, the automatons had constructed a vast anti-orbital defense network, capable of firing on any vessel exiting FTL warp. Any conventional approach would be annihilated before deployments could reach the surface. High Command therefore issued a single plan. A synchronized blitz assault. Hundreds of thousands of Helldiver superdestroyers were to jump simultaneously into orbit to overwhelm the defense grid. Losses were expected, but upon entering orbit, superdestroyers were to immediately deploy Helldivers to Cyberstan. The Helldivers would rapidly dismantle enemy anti-orbital defenses to establish the drophead.
I'm sorry I keep pausing. I just can't. There are more effective ways of doing this. Like, it worked. I'll give them that. But there are more effective ways of doing it. Also, from what I could tell, it didn't really... they didn't destroy enough of them. The ships were still being destroyed left and right. And heavily.
This key position would open the way to deploy the SEAF, so the land invasion could begin. To support this pivotal phase of the operation, resources recovered from the liberated worlds along the march were allocated for the first 24 hours of the assault. But one final decision remained. In order to secure the staging ground throughout the invasion, the Helldivers chose to allow the Democracy space station to raise Merak, which meant that for the synchronized blitz assault, the Helldivers would drop without its support.
Have you ever seen a game where the stronger you become, the more dangerous it is?
No, I don't care.
The countdown had begun, the largest FTL event in galactic history. Never before had the Helldivers attempted an assault of this scale.
Good luck out there.
Their superdestroyers would jump directly into a planetary defense grid designed to destroy them. Losses were pre-approved, but Helldivers do not fear sacrifice. For freedom, for Super Earth, and for managed democracy, they stood ready. On the morning of February 10th, 2186, from the staging world of Merak, the Helldivers jumped to Cyberstan. Upon exiting FTL warp, the skies above Cyberstan burned. Millions of Helldivers dropped through the burning skies to begin the assault. Anti-orbital defenses and surrounding infrastructure had to be dismantled at any cost. For 15 hours, Helldivers were deployed continuously through the twisted mega factories under constant fire against overwhelming resistance. Somehow, the defenses began to fall. Democracy found a way. The drophead was secured, but the cost was far greater than anticipated.
Again, you guys did that to yourselves.
The drophead had been secured, but the cost was unlike anything before. During the march, Helldiver casualties averaged 14 million per day. In the first 15 hours on Cyberstan, 18 million Helldivers were lost. More Helldivers perished in this assault than on any single day of the entire campaign. But in the process, over 700 million automatons and cyborgs were dismantled. Although Helldiver expiration rates more than doubled on Cyberstan, instead of dropping, the total reserves grew. Citizens across the Federation were inspired to join the fight and do their part. 70 million additional Helldivers joined the war effort. The drophead came at great cost, but the will to fight had only strengthened. Preparations then began for the next phase of the operation. To liberate Cyberstan, Transcendence, the center of Cyborg Command, had to be destroyed. In order to reach Transcendence, a path had to be made through
Give me a second, I need that to get off. I need to get rid of the chat that was put in my, well, chat. There, they're gone. Anyway. Right, go back to what I was looking at. There. Grab that. On there, and let's get
3 mega factories, each one larger than the last. Should Helldiver reserves deplete before Transcendence is destroyed, the operation would end in failure. The invasion was divided between two forces. Super Earth Armed Forces units would wage the ground war, advancing across the surface and securing territory. The Helldivers would strike the mega factories directly. Together, a path of liberation would be carved towards the capital. But Phase 3 would not begin until the next morning, as Seif were still being deployed to the drophead. Wasting no time, the Helldivers struck first. Focus was placed on autonomy. The mega factory had already been weakened during the Blitz. Mission footage from the Blitz assault revealed the mega factories of Cyberstan for what they truly were. A sprawling industrial labyrinth of disgusting machinery, littered with monuments of terrorism. And at their center was the cyborgs, employing their techno-socialist tactics, overclocking their automaton slaves beyond failure, driving them forward as disposable resources of war. And only when necessary, they fought alongside them. Reports described close quarters engagements with cyborg combatants, utilizing terrorist techno-martial arts. But the greatest threat was the Vox engine. Massive propaganda machines spouting nothing but lies and heavy fire. Cyborgs were observed embedding themselves within these cowardly war constructs. Fearless, Helldivers did not hesitate. By the end of the first day, nearly half of autonomy had been destroyed. Helldiver casualties ended the first day on Cyberstan at 32 million. Although casualty rates were much higher than anticipated, the next phase of the operation commenced. And as Phase 3 began, it was time for the Seif to take action. With autonomy under pressure, ground forces began pushing west. Progress in the east was slow under heavy shelling. Solidaritet remained heavily fortified. But the 77th Mobile Infantry was rapidly deployed to stabilize the Western Front. The 68th Air Assault Division took heavy casualties, and the 23rd was ordered to reinforce. Meanwhile, the Helldivers were ordered to complete 25 million missions to support the ground invasion. Liberation efforts continued at a steady pace, but the deeper the Helldivers pushed, the worse the discoveries became. The same synthetic plasma once recovered from the magma worlds had been found here. The substance derived from the biomass of Super-Earth citizens was confirmed to be used in the creation of new cyborgs.
Will you choose the warrior, the mage, or the hunter? Well, in Albion Online...
Well, that changes things heavily.
Enraged by this
I might not like humans, but that crosses a line for a person like me.
definitive evidence, Helldivers ensured every cyborg production plant within Autonomy was destroyed. With the return of the Democracy space station from Iraq, Autonomy stood on the brink of collapse after the second day. With Autonomy crumbling, ground armies began pressing beyond it, the Third Army pushing the furthest, advancing past the 18th parallel. Supply lines to Autonomy were severed, reducing the resistance of the mega factories to the north. During the same period, Helldiver casualties on Cyberstan continued to heavily strain the remaining reserves. At the current casualty rate, the operation would end in less than 4 days. To sustain the invasion of Cyberstan, the Ministry of Defense authorized the procurement of inert terminid eggs. Helldivers were directed to cull massive terminid organisms to fund new fast-track Helldiver training, as well as the experimental incendiary Gatling barrage. With Helldivers diverted to the terminid front, progress on Autonomy slowed, but by the evening, the first mega factory on Cyberstan had been destroyed. With its fall, 2 new paths were opened toward the interior of Cyberstan, Lurza and Omniparadis. Lurza was reinforced by the Hulk Surge. Its airspace was saturated with anti-air defenses that severely limited Eagle support. Omniparadis' defenses were bolstered by the heavy armor surge. The sheer scale of the mega factory demanded significant SEAF involvement, placing immense strain on Helldiver ammunition. With resistance high across both targets, it became clear that focusing on a single objective would be critical. However, Helldiver deployments were already spread thin with deployments to the terminid front. For the remainder of the day, no meaningful progress was made on any mega factory. To make matters worse, falsified mission data was discovered within operational reports. These were traced to dissidents influenced by automaton lies. In response, High Command tightened requirements, mandating completion of full operations to ensure fleet-wide integrity. Although Helldiver efforts stalled, the SEAF advance continued. Following the destruction of Autonomy, bot forces were forced to withdraw from the region. The 3rd, 4th, 7th, and 8th armies continued their push northward, forcing cyborg automaton forces to divert resources away from the megafactories to contain the growing ground offensive. However, the 77th Mobile Infantry was reported in retreat. A cyborg-led counteroffensive had broke their position near Solidaritet. Despite SEAF progress, Helldiver operations remained ineffective, even as the majority of deployments shifted toward Omniparadis.
They haven't been able to
Nearly a full day passed
push.
without any measurable progress against its defenses. With the offensive at a standstill, the SEAF took decisive action. Launching a distraction offensive against the surrounding districts of Omniparadis, SEAF forced the enemy to respond. To prevent a collapse of their flank, Cyborg Automaton Command diverted significant forces away from the megafactory. Resistance on Omniparadis was significantly compromised, opening an opportunity for the Helldivers. The Helldivers seized it. Concentrating their efforts on Omniparadis, they began to make measurable progress, establishing a foothold within the megafactory. At the same time, operations on the Terminid front reached completion. Millions of inert Terminid eggs were recovered and sold as patriotic curios. Funding accelerated Helldiver training programs and the deployment of the incendiary Gatling barrage. In total, 70 million additional reinforcements were authorized for immediate deployment. By the following morning, Cyborg Automaton forces returned to Omniparadis in an attempt to stabilize the factory, but in doing so, space had now opened for the SEAF to continue their advance around the megafactory. Even as resistance intensified once more, the Helldivers maintained their momentum. With the activation of the Democracy space station's heavy ordnance distribution, mass bombardments from orbit sustained the offensive, allowing progress to continue. By the end of the 4th day, nearly a third of Omniparadis was destroyed. After 4 days on Cyberstan, Helldiver casualties remained much higher than anticipated. It was then that a discovery was made. Following a spreadsheet audit, warehouses containing 35 million Helldivers in cryostasis were found on Fort Justice. However, there was no vessel capable of transporting these reserves to Cyberstan in time, except for one. The Democracy Space Station. Redeploying it to retrieve the reinforcements would remove it from Cyberstan for 12 hours. As always, Democracy would light the path, and overwhelmingly, Helldivers voted to send for additional reserves. As preparations for its departure began, the SEAF delivered another critical blow.
I'll give
The
them
4th
that.
Army seized an automaton ammunition cache in the nearby manufacturing districts. This relieved ammunition strains and restored full combat capability to Helldiver deployments. Fully stocked, Helldivers continued their push against the Mega Factory, sustaining their advance even as the DSS departed to transport the additional reinforcements. The heavily armored automatons manufactured from the Mega Factory were tanks,
Right, I forgot I joined like
And
much
War
later in the
Striders.
battle.
but there is no extent of mechano-socialist armor that protects against the will of democracy. However, by the end of the 5th day, a troubling briefing was received. Intelligence indicated that the Illuminate were preparing an attack, intending to exploit the ongoing campaign on Cyberstan. To determine their intentions, Helldivers were ordered to deploy to Kurth Secundus. Their objective was to free abducted civilians, as well as capture Illuminate combatants for interrogation. The recovered captives would, in turn, bolster reinforcement allocations for Operation Valid Pretext. While Helldivers were redirected to the Kurth system, the majority remained committed to Omniparatus. Thanks to the ammunition secured by the SEAF, the offensive continued to build momentum. Recognizing the inevitable, Cyborg automaton forces began to withdraw. Supply lines from Starkeel were severed, and Omniparatus was left to operate on diminishing reserves. Together, the Helldivers and SEAF pressed into the collapsing megafactory. Operating on emergency power reserves, the remaining resistance crumbled quickly. Omniparatus roughly translated to destroy freedom at all costs. On the 6th day of the battle for Cyberstan, Omniparatus had failed. While the second megafactory on Cyberstan was demolished, the Democracy Space Station returned, delivering 35 million Helldivers. Operations on Kurth Secundus also completed, and millions of recovered civilians were immediately enlisted and placed into accelerated training programs. But due to constitutional weakness, the Illuminate combatants expired during interrogation, resulting in the temporary authorization of the smoke-enhanced walking barrage. Clear evidence that this was not a waste. From Omniparatus, the path opened to the 2 Class 3 megafactories. Starkeel was one of the largest megafactories on the planet, a critical military production node defended by the Jet Brigade, now reinforced by forces that had deserted Omniparatus. Believed to be among the earliest megafactories on Cyberstan, Ursuit 9 served as one of the most significant producers of cyborg combatants, defended by the Incineration Corps. Between the two, the Helldivers chose Starkeel. The Jet Brigade presented a lower threat than the alternative. As Helldiver operations began, the SEAF advance continued to converge on target. The 12th Armor Division held position at the Omniparatus demolition site to secure the rear with the 4th Army. The 12th would then join the 3rd, 7th, and 8th armies push beyond the equator, advancing to link up with Helldiver operations at Starkeel.
With real-time odds, bet live with Sports Interaction.
No.
Similar to Omniparatus, no measurable progress was made in the first half day. The underhanded rapid assault tactics of both the Jet Brigade and Cyborgs proved to be an overwhelming combination. However, recognizing the inevitable, the Cyborgs diverted forces inward to protect Transcendence rather than holding the outer megafactories. Helldivers capitalized on the opportunity as the Ministry of Defense temporarily augmented Helldiver deployments with the expendable anti-tank rocket launcher, increasing their effectiveness against heavily mechanized resistance. Above the planet, the Democracy Space Station initiated an orbital blockade, severing the enemy's access to raw silicates and conductors. Deprived of proper materials, automaton fabricators were forced to produce units using inferior alloys. On the surface, Helldiver efforts continued to break through, liberating over 25% of Starkeel. It was then that SEAF identified attempts by cyborg automaton units to evacuate mechanized personnel, falsely designated as non-combatant industrial assets. Sief artillery immediately targeted these evacuation corridors, denying the enemy the opportunity to repurpose these assets for continued war production. For the first time since the invasion began, the path toward Transcendence appeared to be opening, and yet the number of completed operations fell short of what was required to sustain the campaign. Phase 3 of the operation had ended in failure. But the offensive did not stop. It could not. With Transcendence now within sight, the final phase of Operation Valid Pretext commenced. All avenues for reinforcement had been exhausted. The forces on Cyberstan were all that remained. Helldivers were ordered to finish the fight, destroy Transcendence, and liberate Cyberstan.
So you're telling me they were cut off from the rest of the force because they failed the major order? Because they were unable to take the position and head to to make a clear path. Now the only people left on Cyberstan itself were the only ones left to actually push forward. That is not good. That is really not good. Ugh. Well, that would explain why things went downhill quick. Because we were so limited in firepower.
As the final phase began, thousands of unauthorized automaton transport vessels attempted to break through the orbital blockade surrounding Cyberstan. But they did not get far. The Sea Fleet engaged the fleeing ships in orbit, intercepting them before they could escape. Across the surface, flaming debris from the shattered vessels rained down across Cyberstan, disrupting enemy communications. With flaming wreckage raining from the skies, Helldiver operations within Starkfield continued at a steady pace. By the next morning, 2/3 of Starkfield had already been destroyed. Meanwhile, the Sief continued their advance in the nearby regions. The 12th Armor Division successfully severed the primary supply lines connecting Cyborg forces in the north to their automaton counterparts in the south. This weakened the defenses of Transcendence. Within Starkfield, the Class 3 Megafactory continued to collapse. The final barrier, protecting the Cyborg capital, was nearly broken. Inspired by the relentless pursuit of liberty by the Helldivers, the Sief 3rd and 7th Armies launched a spirited bayonet charge across
Forces
the
in
equatorial
reserve.
manufacturing belt.
Yeah.
This critical breakthrough triggered a collapse. Cyborg automaton resistance plummeted further across the megafactories to the south. The land invasion and destruction of megafactories had now taken a heavy toll across all of Cyberstan. With resistance weakening and supply lines fractured, the destruction of Starkfield was imminent. Starkfield translated to, all humans must die. On the 8th day on Cyberstan, Starkfield fell. Humanity did not. The path to Transcendence was now clear. The capital Megafactory was the first constructed on Cyberstan. Its destruction would bring about the collapse of all remaining enemy defenses. Both the Jet Brigade and the Incineration Corps had withdrawn to its defense, consolidating their strength into one final stronghold. Sief units moved quickly to secure the approach. The 3rd Army completed its encirclement of Starkfield, while the 22nd Cavalry advanced toward Transcendence to reinforce the forward push. Overhead, the 14th Air Recon Division identified multiple pockets of resistance, providing precise targets for orbital strikes as the battlefield shifted toward the capital. Simultaneously, the Democracy Space Station initiated the Eagle Storm. The 68th Air Assault Division achieved total air superiority over the Cyberstan wastes, allowing Eagle squadrons to conduct uncontested carpet bombardments across automaton supply caches.
Not bad.
It was under these
done.
conditions that Helldivers began their assault on Transcendence. What they encountered was unlike anything before. The Cyborgs commanded both the Jet Brigade and the Incineration Corps. The overclocked Jet Brigade units applied suffocating pressure, swiftly followed by the oppressive flames of the Incineration Corps. Supply lines were dismantled, resistance had crumbled across the planet.
I will be honest, when we, personally, when we got to Transcendence, I've never experienced that much brutality ever on a battlefield. I will be honest, that was probably the worst battle I've ever been in. And I've fought some ridiculous bullshit before. So, the fact that they were overwhelming us and smashing us into dust wasn't exactly surprising at that point. They had the superior firepower.
And air superiority had been obtained. After the first 6 hours, the scale of transcendence became much more clear. Despite all of the advantages, control of the Mega Factory had not even reached 1%. Each of the previous Mega Factories had required more reserves than what remained. Unless there was a major breakthrough, it seemed as though Transcendence could not be destroyed. It was at this moment that a new report was received. The 77th Mobile Infantry had been encircled by cyborg forces in the vicinity of Solidaritet. Cut off and unable to withdraw, their survival now depended on the destruction of the Mega Factory to secure a route of egress. If Solidaritet could not be liberated, the 77th would perish. By this point, the assault on Transcendence was barely holding. Losing any amount of support would collapse all the effort made so far. At the same time, Helldiver reserves were on the verge of depleting. To continue the assault would commit everything that remained, and leave the 77th behind.
Wow. If in that case, it's more of a moral. It's more of a, will you protect your allies or will you abandon them to push the mission forward? My response would be pretty simple. I'm going to abandon the mission to help them. I'm not leaving an ally behind. I'm not that cold. I don't care if the point is to finish the mission. Every life matters on the battlefield.
First steps onto Cyberstan, to the final push toward its capital. The Sief had carried the invasion
But
forward.
it doesn't matter.
Hell,
It's too late for that.
Sir! Ma'am! It is the greatest honor!
I'd follow you into oblivion, Helldiver.
Helldivers? We can't lose! You inspire the soldiers, Helldiver.
Got him, Helldiver!
They did their part. Now it's our turn.
Hey, they're no match for the Helldivers!
The 77th stood alone, fully expecting that their sacrifice would allow their greatest heroes to advance forward. There had not been orders to halt the offensive, but none were needed. The 77th had accepted their fate, but the Helldivers did not. Transcendence could not be destroyed, but it was not too late for Solidaritet. It was then that High Command issued its final order. As the Helldivers had already recognized, Cyberstan could not be freed with the remaining reinforcements. The Terminal Directive was authorized. The Democracy Space Station began a planet-wide orbital bombardment, and all Helldiver arsenals were augmented with the portable Hellbomb. If Cyberstan could not be liberated, it would be reduced to ashes. Sief were ordered to withdraw from all fronts, and Helldivers were tasked with ensuring that as many as possible could escape. Cyborg automaton forces abandoned the outer megafactories. They hid within Transcendence to endure the bombardment. Except for those in Solidaritet, the enemy forces remained intent on finishing the 77th at any cost. Helldivers continued deployments to ensure they would not be left behind. Dropping into Solidaritet, the megafactory had already taken serious damage. With planetary bombardments tearing through the megafactory from above, and Helldivers deploying Hellbombs within, Cyborg and automaton forces collapsed quickly. Helldivers advanced knowing exactly what it would cost, pressing forward through fire and ruin so that those cut off behind enemy lines might still find a way home. As the final hours on Cyberstan counted down, all other Sief units had already been evacuated. Time was running out, but by the end of the 10th day on Cyberstan, Solidaritet was destroyed, and with it, a path was opened. The 77th Mobile Infantry withdrew from the encirclement. 30,000 soldiers, who had already accepted their deaths in service of freedom, were evacuated from Cyberstan and lived to fight again. Following their evacuation, as much damage was dealt to Transcendence as possible, until it was over. Although Cyberstan was not liberated, significant damage was dealt. 4 megafactories were destroyed, and billions of cyborgs and automatons were extinguished. Operation Valid Pretext ended in failure. All ships withdrew, and the peacekeeping operation on Cyberstan came to an end. The threat of a socialist planet killer remains, In the following weeks, the returned cyborgs would spread terror to other worlds. Court Bay and Lesath were raised by the DSS, forever marking the path to Cyberstan. And that is our report for days 726 to 743 of the Second Galactic War Data Archive, the first battle for Cyberstan. We will be reporting in again on recent events. Stay free, Data Archive. SCS Defender Freedom, ending transmission.
Not bad. Not bad at all. I'd say that was the correct choice, because they weren't going to win. None of us were. We didn't have the firepower, and neither did we have enough forces to continue. But they made the right choice, saving that group of Sith. I'm glad they saved. I'm glad they helped them. It was probably the best choice. I know. Personal. This is just my thinking, but they also could have tried. I know they were trying to push forward, but they could have had another group also go to the opposite side to help clear out that area, because the more places destroyed, the better our chances of coming back would be. Because, again, they all went to Transcendence. There was still a chance we could have busted more of their defenses up with the time we had left. However, it would have been more risky to do that anyway. Oh boy. Anywho, it's time for me to find something else for us to watch. What do I want to watch? Do I want to walk Edge Bushwhack 18? I actually don't know what I want to do. Or what I'm going to watch next. Well, I can guarantee this, by the way. Tomorrow I'll definitely be streaming again, probably after my hours of practice. But yeah, that is a very good report on how Cyberstan went. Because I wasn't there the entire time, because I wasn't going to stay into that. I wasn't really staying in that fight. Because of my lack of firepower. You know what? For today, I think that will be it. I know it wasn't as long as my normal ones are, but hey. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a good day or night. Goodbye, everybody. I love you. Bye. Mwah.